Good morning. I'm Mario, and I'd like to welcome everybody here today on behalf of Brotherhood and myself and my co-chair Bob Zacher. And we are going to have a marvelous morning this morning as we listen to Dr. Sanjeev Chopra in just a very few minutes. I would just like to make a few announcements about upcoming programs that we have sponsored by Brotherhood. So we have the Isaiah Coffee House, Ezekiel's Wheels Klezmer Band, and that's coming up next Saturday, November 18th at 7:30 p.m. right here at the temple. The next Brotherhood board meeting will be on Wednesday, December 6th at 7:30 p.m. Our first Friday towards study program is going to be Friday, December 8th. It's usually the first Friday of the month, but this particular time is going to be the second Friday, and that's December 8th. Calling All Sports, our new program, Thursday, December 14th at 7:30 p.m., both online and in person. Still Standing, a night comedy in a community. That is by Bob Eisenberg. He's done a tremendous job. And that is going to be a night of comedy, Saturday, December 16th, right here at the temple, starting at 7:30 p.m. On December 17th, that'll be the next breakfast. And that's going to be reproductive rights in the 21st century. It's going to be a panel discussion with 3 participants. And that'll be Sunday, December 17th. We were honored today, a great deal by having Dr. Chopra here. And I would like to thank Dr. Alan Penshaw for his friendship with Dr. Chopra and for his speaking with Dr. Chopra and having him show up to speak with us this morning. So we're very honored, and I'd like Alan to come up. Dr. Alan Penshaw, a temple member and the
public direction. Thanks so much. And welcome to all of you here at Temple Isaiah. Welcome to everyone who's signed up, I believe, from a number of countries on the Zoom presentation today. With great pleasure that I introduce you to my long-term colleague and best friend, Professor Dr. Sanjeev Chopra. Sanjeev was born in India and at age 16 decided to pursue a medical career. His father at the time wore 2 distinctly different hats. He was a colonel in the Indian Army, and he was certainly the preeminent cardiologist in the country at that time. And at age 16, Sanjeev entered medical school, and being in a 6-year program. It's a program that is followed in British-related countries. And the first 4 years went very smoothly. He ran into trouble at age 20 when he fell for the charms of a co-medical student in his class, Amita. And Amita's here today as his wife for more than 50 years. And thanks so much for coming in, Amita. We're charmed by your presence. You, my friend, would be nothing without Amita. Everything you are today, you certainly owe her, and owe her in spades. So keep quiet and listen. He completed Amita and Sanjeev then came to the United States in the early 1970s, at which stage he started and completed his postgraduate training, firstly in general internal medicine, followed by a fellowship in what was referred to as gastroenterology at that stage, and then special training in what was a developing specialty at the time, and that was hepatology, or the study of liver disease. Salt chopped liver, or if you speak Yiddish, gehachte liver. Okay. So, having done that, he pursued, Sanjeev pursued a number of very different courses with his life. Firstly, he was an active and very active and popular practitioner of medicine, of traditional medicine, practicing principally at the Brigham and Women's Hospital and the Beth Israel Hospital, firstly. Secondly, he was in charge of medical education and its development at the Harvard Medical School, and pursued that for many years, and then developed an interest in life and living and developing that aspect of his persona. And to that end, has written a number of books, I think 10 or 12 at the moment, and one of the books that he has written is the book that he wrote with Gina, who's present with us today. Gina, well, thanks for coming. And the book is The Two Most Important Days in Your Life. In addition, he has written an important book with his brother, Deepak, whom incidentally he refers to as Six-Pack. Written a book on brotherhood with him, and it's very interesting. And just as an aside, that two guys who've got, I would imagine, the same genetic material and certainly the same home environment, both went to medical school, both completed their training as doctors, and have gone in very, very different directions. Sanjeev practicing traditional medicine, as you would know in this country, and his brother Deepak, who's very well known for an alternative approach to medicine. So it's an interesting divergence in the family. There is a electronic means of doing medical research called UpToDate, which has been developed over about the last 10 years. And UpToDate is subscribed to online by physicians in very close to 200 countries at this stage. And every aspect of medicine is covered in UpToDate. The principal editor in liver disease, since the inception of the UpToDate concept about 10 years ago, has been Sanjeev, and he continues in that very important role in developing reliable commentary on a medical level about what's going on.
Your time is up.
You leave me speechless, but not for long. Sanjeev, I have seen lecture on a number of occasions, and what he does is he runs around the stage like my 2-year-old granddaughter would say, a bunny rabbit. He's up and he's down and he's here and he's there. He's very dynamic in his movements. Recently, he's been slowed down a little by the vagrancies and vicissitudes of a knee replacement. So he's going to be sitting today instead of moving, and we'll see how he performs under those circumstances. With that said, and I hope that I haven't exceeded the time allotted to me, I'm going to hand over to Sanjeev. It's all yours, big boy. Give him hell.
Thank you so very much, Alan, for that very kind and warm introduction. I'm absolutely honored and humbled to be in your midst in this venerated space to talk about something I'm passionate about, a topic that became the subject of the book that I wrote with my friend and former colleague, Gina Will, a talk that I've had the privilege of giving around the country and around the world on many occasions. And like any talk, it keeps evolving. Alan mentioned the important role that my wife Amita played in my life. And I was saying that behind every so-called successful man, behind every so-called successful man is his wife with her eyes rolled up. Now, before I start, I'm going to humbly invite all of you to rise in body, posture, or spirit and observe a few moments of silence in the hope for lasting peace in Israel, the Mideast, Ukraine, and beyond. Thank you. We're going to talk about happiness, joy, and bliss. And I'm going to make a distinction between these often commonly used terms. Now, all the research has shown that meaningful experiences and taking part in charitable events, being philanthropic, will give you much more long-lasting happiness than procuring a luxury car or moving into a huge mansion at Beverly Hills. If you do that, you'll be happy for a short period of time, but then you'll get used to it. It's a car, it's a house, okay, you entertain people, you sleep there, and you get used to it. And this phenomenon is called hedonic adaptation. We're often on this so-called hedonic treadmill, thinking, oh, I get the promotion, I move into a bigger house, I join a country club, I get this car, I'll be happy. Yeah, you'll be happy for a short period of time, then you move on. In contrast, meaningful experiences like partaking in a charity event or traveling. This happens to be Milford Sound, one of the most beautiful scenic spots on this planet in New Zealand. And I've had the good fortune of traveling there with my wife. But you know what? You and I don't have to go to Milford Sound. We can go to a local coffee shop. We can go to a bakery. We can go to see a play. We can go to see a movie. We can go sit on a bench in the park on a good sunny day and read a nice book. And that will give you much more sustained and durable happiness. So happiness is this sensation of feeling good. It's an inward experience and you express it outwardly. If you're walking in that corridor and you see somebody walking across you and she's got a cell phone and she's looking at an iPhone and she's smiling, you know she's happy, at least in that moment. Joy is much more exuberant, but it's more transient and temporary. And bliss has been called perfect joy. And when you experience bliss, you're anchored with other people and you feel connected with nature. If you and I need to witness bliss, all we have to do is go to a park and you see the children play, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds on the slide, on the swing, and they're in bliss, not a care in the world. And the 4-year-old falls, bruises his knee, and is sobbing, and another 5-year-old comes and consoles him. And 20 seconds later, he's back in bliss. We can learn so much from children. I refer to them as modern day philosophers, and I'll come back to that. So what happened here? We are in bliss.
Connector tight, I mean.
Yeah, it's. It flashed a second.
It's warming up. Give it some coffee.
Projectors coming.
It's on over here.
It's on the screen.
Projector.
Yeah, it's up here.
We need it here for people on that. So it is moving, and it is working. Maybe it's start all over again, reboot. Yeah. So I'll try and remember what the next slide is, but what happens to?
You can say it.
Yeah, but I need the slide before that.
Yeah.
Oh.
You can still control it.
Okay. So what happens to lottery winners?
Yeah, but it goes back.
Yeah, can you move it a little bit? So what happens to lottery winners a year later? We know people, you can't see it though. All right, we have to turn it so they can see it on that side. Yeah.
The speaker has.
So all the research has shown that if you win 10 or 20 million dollars, even from a scratch ticket, you'll be happy for a short period of time. And if you survey these people a year later, most of them are back to their baseline level of happiness or even less happy. They've splurged, their friends and relatives came out of the woodwork. How did you get so lucky? Pay off my mortgage. And the only ones who are actually happier are those who partake in meaningful experiences. We know, many of us on that table know a gentleman who used to work at Costco in Waltham. And he was the guy as you exited from the door. His name is Reggie, and he would look at your card and sign you off. And together with a fellow colleague, he bought a $6 scratch ticket, and they won $20 million. So he got 10 million. Now he's been given very sound advice. He's taking care of his mother and sister. He got a passport for the first time. He's traveling. He is into sports memorabilia, and he's an amazing guy. And 7 years later, he's happy as a lark. So that's the key if you win a lot of money. Look at the flip side. One of the worst fates that can befall a human being is to have a spinal cord injury and become a paraplegic, become paralyzed for life. And that's happened to Christopher Reeves. You remember Superman? Yeah. He was an accomplished equestrian taking part in a race, and suddenly the horse buckled and he went flying, broke his neck. He's paralyzed for life. He had a wonderful wife, he had great friends. And a lot of these people, for the first 2 or 3 months, have a victim mentality. Why did God do this to me? I didn't deserve it. But human beings are amazingly resilient. And this is what he said before the year was over. He said, this is not the life I imagined I would be living, but it has meaning. There is joy, there is laughter, there is purpose. So it's amazing how human beings can be so resilient. And here's, if you can see this slide, not on the screen, that's what he said, that's Christopher Reeves. Rabindranath Tagore was a Nobel laureate from India. In 1912, he wrote a series of poems in his native language, Bengali. And in 1913, he translated it himself into English. And he got the Nobel Prize in Literature. Beautiful. If you like spiritual poetry, that's the book to read. Gitanjali. He's the one who coined the term Mahatma for Gandhi. After Gandhi's work for 20 years in South Africa, fighting discrimination, he said he's a Mahatma. Ma in Hindi means great, Atma means soul. He's a great soul. And Tagore once said, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy.
Oh,
One of the best ways for us to be happy is to make others happy. I was recently asked to define philanthropy, and I said it's a very simple definition. Philanthropy is love for humanity. And most people equate philanthropy with writing a check or going to a fundraiser, buying a table. That's one of them. 3 T's: treasure, time, talent. If you give any of those 3, you're philanthropic. And we have so many opportunities, even when we are retired, to inspire school children or people in the neighborhood.
yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Now, Socrates, prior to him saying it, there was a prevalent belief that happiness was bestowed upon a select few. Who were these people? Nobility, royalty, poets, philosophers. And he argued, no. Everyone is entitled to happiness. And it can be gotten by human endeavor. And that happiness and virtue are inextricably linked. The ancient Greeks did not use the term happiness. They used a term called eudaimonia, which literally translated means human flourishing. Stop. Good. Okay. So here we go. So there's some ancient Greek words. I've already talked about eudaimonia, but there's arit, which is always aiming for excellence. And eidos, the feeling of reverence or shame, which restrains us from doing wrong. Now, here's the conclusion I've come to by reflecting on this for almost 2 decades, reading a lot of books, talking to my friends, colleagues, my grandchildren, and even a Nobel laureate too. And the conclusion is that the first trait of happy people is they have a cadre of friends, right? Your friends are your chosen family. I got very lucky with my parents and my one sibling, my older brother, Deepak Chopra. But I didn't have a choice. I was born into that family. But your friends you can choose. There's a best-selling author by the name of James Roy. He said, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time. How profound is that? You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time. So cultivate your friendships and cherish those people. They're your chosen family. Robert Louis Stevenson, this is stuck again, Jeff, and we advance it. Once said, a friend is a gift you give to yourself. Khalil Gibran said, friendship is a sweet responsibility, never an opportunity. Now, this is the most amazing study. If you're not familiar with this, you'll be astounded. What study goes on for more than 18 years? Funding disappears, the principal investigators pass, people drop out of the study. So a year after Hitler sent his troops into Austria, the study was started. And they recruited 750 21-year-olds in Boston. 250 went to Harvard. The other 500 were from very poor and dysfunctional families in Dorchester and Roxbury. Detailed questionnaires every year, physical examination, EKG, blood pressure, C-reactive protein, cholesterol, functional MRI. A cohort of their children, 2,000, are being followed in a similar study. As of a few years ago, 19 was still alive, age 91. Who was in this group? There were doctors, lawyers, businessmen, skid row alcoholic derelicts, people who died of suicide. One of them was our president, Kennedy, was in this study. And the current principal investigator is Robert Waldinger. He's a professor of psychiatry at Harvard, based at Mass General. He also very interesting, a Zen monk. And he's given a brilliant TED talk. It's the #1 TED talk given by a physician. What makes a happy life? The longest standing study on adult happiness. Robert Waldinger. I think I have a slide about that. George Reliant wrote a book about this. He was the previous principal investigator for like 26 years, The Triumph of Experience. And what is the conclusion of the study? One conclusion: loneliness is toxic. And that your satisfaction with relationships with friends at age 50 is a better predictor of health, happiness, and longevity 30 years later at age 80. Better than what? Your blood pressure, your EKG, your cholesterol. So I teach all the medical students at Harvard and interns, residents, junior faculty. You may have 15 minutes for a repeat visit. The last 20 seconds, ask them, what do they do to celebrate with friends? Nurture your friendships. And point them to this study and point them to this TED Talk. And this is the TED Talk by Robert Wilden. What makes a good life? Lessons from the longest study on happiness. So the first tenet for being happy is having a cadre of good friends. Loneliness increases with age and is indeed toxic. This is a recent study. Meta-analysis of 70 studies showed that loneliness increases the chance of dying by an astounding 26%. Genes that code for inflammation is the enemy. Whether it's COVID, cancer, obesity, liver disease, Alzheimer's, inflammation is the enemy. Genes that code for inflammatory response are turned on. Genes involved in fighting viral infections are downregulated. Here's a wonderful friendship blessing by John O'Donoghue. May you be blessed with good friends. May you learn to be a good friend to yourself. May you be able to journey to that place in your soul where there is great love, warmth, healing, and forgiveness. May this change you. May it transfigure that which is negative, distant, or cold in you. May you be brought into the real passion, kinship, and affinity of belonging. May you treasure your friends. May you be good to them, and may you be there for them. May they bring you all the blessings, challenges, truth, and light that you need for your journey. The second trait of the happiest people on this planet is the ability to forgive. Anyone listening, if you're holding a grudge, bitterness against an ex, a spouse, a neighbor, a sibling, a friend, a colleague, my plea, get rid of it. The moment you make that decision, you'll feel this enormous weight come off your shoulders. I've personally experienced this with a friend. So forgiveness, it's not easy to forgive, right? One of the best examples of forgiveness is that of Nelson Mandela. Spent 27 years in prison. Can you imagine 27 hours, days, weeks, months? 27 years. And when he's released, Mr. Mandela, do you have a resentment against your white captors? And he gave the most elegant answer. He said, I have no bitterness, I have no resentment. Resentment is like drinking poison, then hoping it will kill your enemies. He said, as I walked out the gate towards my freedom, I looked back at my cell and I said to myself, if you still harbor resentment, you'll still be in prison, right? The prison of the mind. Albert Schweitzer was a physician, theologian, humanitarian, Nobel laureate. He believed that reverence for truth trumped everything. One day as a prisoner of war, he's going to see a general who has an abscess. He's going to examine him and drain the abscess. And he's going on a train with his wife, and the train is going over a bridge, on a bridge over a river. And he looks to his side, and there are hippopotami, including baby hippopotamuses, frolicking in the river. And suddenly, this German phrase flashes across his mind. Erfurt worden leben, which is hard to translate, but it means reverence for. And suddenly it hits him. It's not reverence for truth that trumps everything. It's reverence for life. That's the most exalted. If I give you a newborn baby to hold, you cannot but want to protect it, right? It's human nature. And what Albert Schweitzer taught us was that you have to have the same reverence for a disfigured leper. And now in this current age for a patient with end-stage HIV or AIDS. The Beth Israel Hospital, where I've been privileged to work for 35 plus years, is a sister hospital to a hospital that he started with his wife and nurse, Albert Schweitzer, more than 115 years ago in Gabon, Africa. We celebrated the centennial about 15 years ago. He got the Nobel Prize and talk about humility. At the ceremony, he said, now I have to go earn it. Now I have to go earn it. Talk about humility. Next slide. The third trait I've derived from Albert Schweitzer, who once said, I don't know what your destiny will be, but one thing I'm certain of, the ones amongst you who will be truly happy are those who have sought and found how to serve. So I've distilled it into 3 F's: friends, forgiveness, for others. The fourth one begins with the letter G. What is it? You know it.
Grateful.
Gratitude, right? It doesn't necessarily become God. There are some atheists who do God's work. So gratitude, and one of the ways to serve is a wonderful quote by Mahatma Gandhi, who said, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. So the fourth tenet is gratitude. And it's a highly prized tenet in all the religions. Derived from the Latin root gratia, meaning grace, graciousness, gratefulness. I'm defining gratitude as the experience of something positive, coupled with the realization that somebody else was responsible for that positive experience. And we can cultivate gratitude. One of the easiest ways, if you don't do it, or you do it, you know, is by the regular practice of meditation. Many different kinds of meditation, they all work. I was saying that I wrote a book about, one of the books I wrote. You should meditate once a day, and if you don't have time to do that, you should meditate twice a day. Right? But you can also cultivate gratitude simply by having a gratitude journal. You don't even have to do it every day. Let's say every Sunday. Today is Sunday evening. As you're reflecting on what's in store for you next week, look back at what transpired the last 7 days and write down. It takes 5 minutes what you're grateful for. Research by Robert Evans, considered one of the fathers of modern positive psychology, to verify this. Now here's a very famous study. This is known as the Catholic nun study. In the 1930s, 180 nuns joined the Notre Dame convent. And the Mother Superior said to each one of them, on a piece of paper, write down a little bit about who you are, what you're looking forward to. And 60 years later, the researchers could authenticate the handwriting. And they classified what they wrote into low gratitude and high gratitude. And I'm not going to read the low gratitude. I think the first one is actually pretty neutral, not necessarily low. But you see the second one, it incorporates the words of happy, joy, life of union with love divine. They are 23. They live in the same convent. They eat the same food. Nobody drinks, nobody smokes, nobody's married. What happened? On average, the nuns who expressed high gratitude lived 10 years longer. That is absolutely miraculous. We had a pill that would make us live 3 years longer. It'd be $1 trillion pill, right? So this is being published, and several years ago, positive emotional content in early life autobiography strongly associated with longevity 6 decades later. Few wonderful quotes about gratitude. Gratitude is not only the greatest of virtues, but the parent of all others. To speak gratitude is courteous and pleasant, but to enact gratitude is generous and noble. But if you live gratitude, it is to touch heaven. Now, it turns out there is a happiness formula. And this is based on the study of monozygotic twins and comparing them with dizygotic twins. And what it says is that 50% of our happiness is genetic. And you probably know families where there may be 3 kids and 2 kids are happy and the 3rd kid is not happy. Same parents, same home, same school, same, locality they live in, the food they eat, inherited, set point. But the set point can also be adjusted, just like the thermostat in this room, we can adjust. I'll come back to that. Astoundingly, only 10% of our happiness is related to living conditions. 10%, whether you live in a mansion in Beverly Hills, or the slums of Calcutta, or the shanty towns of Joburg. 10%. You have a roof, running water. Some of those people are more happy than you and me, right? You may have seen Slumdog Millionaire, wonderful movie. And they would celebrate every festival, weddings, the birth of a child. You can see the happiness radiating. But 40% is voluntary action. What we can do to serve others, to make others happy. So this formula is fluid and dynamic. Next slide, Chad. And that set point, we all know, physical exercise, behavioral cognitive therapy, antidepressants, meditation can all improve that set point. And astoundingly, the practice of gratitude. So this is the book I mentioned, paperback, thanks, How the New Science of Gratitude Can Make You Happy. He took a large group and he randomized them and he told half of them every day for the next 6 weeks, at the end of the day, spend 3 minutes and jot down 3 or 4 things you did. The other half randomized every day at the end of the day for the next 6 weeks, write down 3 or 4 things you're grateful for. And the end of 6 weeks, the group that expressed gratitude, that set point went up by an astounding 25%. Right? Low tech, where it works. Here's a book called The Power of Thanks, How Social Recognition Empowers Employees and Creates the Best Place to Work. Some years ago, Google took their top managers to Costa Rica for an all-expense paid vacation. Bring your significant other. 12 days, everything paid for. Hotel, airplane, golf courses, visit to coffee farms, beach. And on average, it cost Google $18,000 per top manager. The previous year, they had received a cash bonus of $50,000. And they were asked, what would you prefer in future years? Cash bonus of $50,000 or a trip like this to Costa Rica? Overwhelming majority chose the trip. Again, social connectedness, fabric, they made friends, wonderful memories. They met colleagues they had never met before, other than by email. So it's amazing, again, the power of friendship. Next slide.
Hurry.
Yeah, that went backwards. Okay. Now, Viktor Frankl, what an amazing individual. He wrote, as I'm sure many of you know, if not all of you, Man's Search of Meaning in 9 Days. And I revisit that book every year to be inspired. And Viktor Frankl once said, happiness cannot be pursued. It must ensue as the unintended side effect of dedication to a cause greater than your oneself. Next slide. Albert Schweitzer said, success is not the key to happiness. Happiness is the key to success. If you're happy, you'll sleep better, you'll have a better immune system, you'll be more creative, you'll have better friends, and you will thrive in life. Now look at the wisdom of children. When I give this talk at universities and medical schools and academic centers, and there are lots of faculty in there, I tell them, ask your kids, grandkids, nephews, nieces to complete the sentence, happiness is. And I'm astounded by their responses. It's not a birthday party, it's not a sleepover. This is a 5-year-old girl who's the daughter of one of the deans at Assumption College in Worcester. She said, I asked my daughter, what's happiness? And my daughter immediately replied, Mommy, happiness is when the heart feels bigger. What a beautiful definition. 2 years 10-month-old boy, the son of a surgeon at the Beth Israel Deaconess. I give surgical grand rounds on this topic. And he asked his son, he says, Daddy, I'm most happy when I'm sharing my toys with my friends. 2 years and 10 months. Now, you all know about John Lennon. Oh, I'll come to that. But listen, you don't need a reason to be happy. Look at these poor kids in India. And one of them takes off her slipper and pretends it's a cell phone. And she's taking a selfie. And next, selfie with a sword. That's what it is. Now look at John Lennon, the Beatle. He goes to school and at age 5 years. And the teacher gives the kids an assignment. Write down what you want to be when you grow up. He writes happy and hands it to the teacher. And the teacher says, John, you didn't understand the assignment. And he looks up and he says to the teacher, and you don't understand life. 5 years of age. Every night when his mother tucked him into bed, he said, John, when you grow up, I want you to be happy. You remember that? Next slide. Look at the infinite wisdom of beloved cartoon characters. So this is Snoopy and Charlie Brown. And Snoopy says, we only live once, Snoopy. And Charlie Brown says, wrong. We only die once. We live every day. How beautiful is that? And you remember Milne wrote a book almost 100 years ago, Winnie the Pooh. And Winnie the Pooh says to Piglet, if you live to be 100, I want to live to be 100 minus 1 day. So I never have to live without you. How beautiful and sublime is that friendship and that love. Next slide. Now, some years ago, I'm going to be at Mayo Clinic, Rochester as a visiting prof, and early in the morning, I go to get some coffee, I put on my suit, I have an hour and a half to kill, and I said, you know what, Siri knows the answer to everything. Let me ask Siri. What's the secret to happiness? And I'm not making this up. So I said, Siri, what is the secret to happiness? And the answer came back, it is unequivocally chocolate. And as I come out with my coffee, there's a coffee shop, which is not open, it's 6:30 in the morning. But there's a sign there, it says, money can't buy happiness, but it can buy chocolate, which is kind of like happiness. Next slide. Now, every year there's a survey of countries to see which is the happiest, amongst the happiest countries. And year after year, it's pretty similar. This year it was Finland. No, let's go back. Yeah, but these are the countries almost always there. Denmark, Norway, Australia, Bhutan. Bhutan is a small country in the foothills of the Himalayas. 40 years ago, the ruler said, we don't care about GDP. We care about gross happiness product. They have a ministry of happiness. They track everyone's happiness level each year with the goal of improving it. Pretty enlightened. Austria, Costa Rica. Costa Rica is an amazing country. You all know about Oscar Arias, Nobel laureate, president, enlightened ruler. It's the first country to ban zoos. Zoos, animals should not be in captivity for our entertainment. They have a shorter lifespan. The first country to have no military. They have a little bit of police, but no one's going to invade us. And we're going to invest all the money into ecology, coffee farms, etc., for the benefit of our people. Singapore, Switzerland, Sweden, Canada, Iceland, New Zealand. Begs the question, where's America?
Yes.
Right? We're 19th, 21st, 27th. The richest and most powerful country in the world. We're not that happy. Now, what's unique about Denmark, next slide, is that they partake in a phenomenon called hygge. And they also do this in Norway. And we did it years ago in our country and probably every country. So if I'm in Alan's neighborhood, I don't pick up the phone and say, Alan, are you at home? Can I drop by for a cup of coffee? I simply ring the door. And he opens the door, he says, hey, Sanjeev, come on in. And you sit by the fireplace, you have hot chocolate. You're not allowed to discuss politics or religion. And you talk about life and happiness. It also happens in Norway. Now, tragically, many of us don't even know the neighbor 2 doors from us. Who does? But there's something, I've been to Denmark. It was my ambition to go to Denmark, and my wife Amita and I, another couple, went there and spent an amazing time there. And tragically, when I came back, I discovered they opened 2 months later a museum. Next slide. It's the first museum of happiness in the world, in Copenhagen, Denmark. And there's also something very interesting about Denmark. When kids go to school, between the ages of 6 and 16, so that's a good 10, 11 years, every week, every single week, let's say there are 30 weeks in the school year, there's a mandatory interactive class on empathy. These kids at a young age are learning about compassion and empathy and tolerance. I think every school in the world should have that kind of program. Next slide. So although we've talked about 4 things, friends, forgiveness for others, and gratitude, happiness is more than the sum total of happy moments. And in order for you and me to have lasting happiness, we have to find our purpose in life and live. Those are the happiest people on this planet. Next slide. Mark Twain famously said, the 2 most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. How good is that? The day you're born and the day you find out why. Next slide. Now, defining your purpose can come by reflecting on it, or by virtue of a key moment that you experience in your life. That key moment is often stark, it's negative, but it's momentous. And if you have the courage, the fortitude, the grit, and the love to say, this is not acceptable, I'm going to try and make a difference here and define it, then you can find your purpose in life. Great leaders reflect on key events in their life. And sometimes that key event becomes the start of something absolutely momentous. And it becomes sometimes a lifelong journey. Next slide. Most of us will experience sorrow. When you experience the abyss of sorrow and emerge stronger and with a clear purpose, you will have triumph. Next slide. Again, Viktor Frankl, he said, we who lived in concentration camps can remember the men. They may have been few in number, walking amongst the huts, giving away their last piece of bread. They offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Next slide. Joseph Campbell was an enlightened scholar. There's a wonderful documentary series in the late 80s on public television. Bill Moyes interviewed him many times. He wrote a book called The Power of Myth. He wrote another book called A Hero's Journey. And he once said, follow your bliss and doors will open where there were no doors before. Next slide. Here's an interesting individual, very accomplished individual, an economist in the country of Venezuela. And on a lark, 40 years ago, he took 9 kids off the street in Venezuela, taught them classical music. There are now 400,000 children in Venezuela performing classical music. It's called El Sistema, which means the system. And the government subsidizes it. A few years ago, he, at the commencement at Harvard, there were 2 people who got the honorary doctorate, and it was a brew and Oprah Winfrey. Next slide. One of his pupils is Gustavo Dudamel, who at age 27 became the celebrated conductor of the LA Philharmonic. He's one of the most celebrated conductors in the world. And he performed with a troupe of these kids from Venezuela in Vienna at the Philharmonic. And the critics said, performance of the year. 90% of these kids come from impoverished families. They'd be on drugs, in gangs, even dead. So he found his purpose in life 40 years ago, just on a lark, picking 9 kids off the street. This program, by the way, exists now because of Gustavo Dudamel in LA. It exists in Boston, in Scotland, in Spain, in Greece, in many different countries. Poor kids performing amazing classical music. Next slide. Now, many of you, I'm sure, have heard of Partners in Healthcare, founded in 1987 by Paul Farmer and Jim Kim. They were students at Harvard Medical School. And I got to know them, and I'm just saying this matter of factly, not bragging, but in 1991, the many years, I directed the GI, gastroenterology, pathophysiology course. And when the students graduate, they pick one person in their 4 years as the Excellence in Teaching Award. And I was privileged they bestowed it upon me. So I got to know Paul Farmer and Jim Kim. Jim Kim is originally from South Korea. Jim Kim said to me one time, he said, you know, Paul and I are brothers. We fight all the time. We love each other. We just happen to be from different mothers. And one time, they're applying for a grant for Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Jim Kim comes at the end of the weekend. He says, Paul, what are we asking for? And Paul says, well, it's a pilot. So I have the budget and proposal, and it's 2.3 million. And Jim said, nah, I thought about it all weekend. We're going to ask for $24.3 million. I have a much more robust vision and a bigger budget. They applied, they got it. Jim came after 17 years, left to become the president of Dartmouth at a young age. Then he was tapped by President Obama to lead the World Bank. Paul Farmer continued his work, offering healthcare for the poorest of the poor, the most destitute in Rwanda, Peru, Haiti, Russian prisoners with multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, Native American reservations. Next slide. He once had the idea that some lives matter less. He's talking about poor people. Is the root of all that's wrong with the world. His favorite billboard is one he encountered in Haiti 25 years ago, and it says, the only true nation is humanity. Next slide. This is a patient dying with end-stage HIV/AIDS in Haiti. Bare skeleton of a man. Paul Farmer, together with Jim Kim, goes to the pharmacy at the Brigham and Women's Hospital with an empty suitcase. And they sweet talk their way into the pharmacist, giving them $93,000 worth of antiretrovirals, the medicine to treat HIV. They fly to Haiti and they administer it to this man. Next slide. And this is the same individual who's now fully recovered, has this beautiful baby. The story of Paul Farmer's work is told in a wonderful book by Tracy Kidder. Next slide. Tracy Kidder followed him for 3 years, day in, day out, and then wrote this book. It's called Mountains Beyond Mountains, The Quest of Dr. Paul Farmer, a man who would cure the world. Beautiful book. Next slide. There's a wonderful documentary that you can watch on Netflix. It's called Bending the Arc. And again, it's about Paul Farmer, Jim King, Ophelia Dahl, and others. It won many, many awards. Bending the arc is a phrase derived from the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who once said, the arc of the moral compass is long, but it bends towards justice. The arc of the moral compass is long, but it bends towards justice. You can watch this on Netflix. Next slide. So Paul Farmer goes to Rwanda, and February 21st of 2022, he sees patients all day, he goes to sleep, and he has a fatal heart attack. Age 62. He feared it. His father had died young of a heart attack. Jim Kim flew with his family to Rwanda to bring the body back, Paul's body back to Miami, where he grew up in an old decrepit bus. We had a wonderful ceremony at Harvard Med School. Gina and Tony were there, Amita was there. maybe 200 people. It was below freezing in February, a 1-hour ceremony. And all the speeches were given by students whom he had inspired. But one was given by our dean, George Daly. Short speech. And in it he said, Paul Farmer would go down as the greatest humanitarian of our time. And then he said, Paul Farmer was my mentor. For the head team to say that of a student. He won the MacArthur Genius Award, which is close to $500,000, plowed it into his foundation. He won another award, more than 1.5 million, plowed it into his foundation. He told his wife, give enough money for the electricity bills and the groceries, the rest goes into the foundation. After his death, a couple has bestowed $50 million in honor of Paul Farmer's work for the Department of Global Health at Harvard Medical School. Amazing inspirational people. Surgeons, physicians, dentists, nurses, students from all over the world volunteered to do work with Paul Farmer. Amazing guy, saint of that. Next slide. Now here are 5 things you see on the screen. I should have spent more time with my friends. I should have traveled more. I should have been the bigger person and said, I'm sorry. I should have had the courage to pursue my dreams and aspirations. I should have said, I love you more often. Who says these 5 things? You know it. Sam, who do you think says this?
People on their deathbed.
Yeah, people in hospice, right? This is a nurse who interviewed like 1,000 people. Nobody said I should have worked harder. Belonged to 3 country clubs, driven a new Ferrari every 6 months. So the point of this is that we should all be doing this now. None of us should have any of these regrets on our deathbed. Next slide. Next slide. Here's an amazing lady, Mariah Smith. She was abandoned at birth outside an orphanage. And at 2 years, a couple in Virginia adopted. When she's 17, she goes with her mother to get takeout. It's winter. She's about to sit in the car in the front right side and sees a homeless man shivering on the street. Says, Mom, I'm going to give him the food. Mother says, yeah, give him the food. We'll have soup and bread, whatever at home. Goes home. She says, Mom, got to go back. Give him a blanket. I have 2 blankets. I don't need it. 2 blankets. Fresh blanket, gives it to him. She's called the blanket girl. She is now given away. Next slide. No, yeah, this one. 180,000 blankets. Merchants all over the area support her. She goes at 11 o'clock at night to parks where there are these homeless people whose families have abandoned them. Some of them are mentally challenged. They refuse to go into shelter. With a box full of bottled water, vitamin D3, snacks, insect repellent, unconditional love. Chapters opening up all over the country. She was asked, what was the reaction of that first guy you gave the blanket to? She said, oh my God, he looked up. It was a combination of shock and gratitude. It haunts me to this day, but it keeps me going. Right? An angel amongst us. Next slide. Now here's an amazing young individual. You may have heard of him, and he's written a wonderful book called Promise of a Pencil. His name is Adam Braun. He's studying at Brown. He does a semester in C, and he goes to many different countries in Africa and Asia. And on a lark, he picks an 8-year-old kid off the street and through an interpreter says, if you could have one wish in the world, what would it be? So in an African country, an 8-year-old girl, next slide says, to dance. He says, come on. She didn't get the question. Ask her again. You can have one wish in the world. What would you want? She says, to dance. He goes to another country, another 8-year-old girl says, you can have one wish in the world. What would it be? She says, for my mother to be healthy, hold my hand and walk me to school. He goes to India. He's mesmerized. He loves India, despite the crowds and the filth. And he meets an 8-year-old beggar boy. Same question. You can have one wish in the world. What would it be? And the boy says, a pencil. He says, what? Ask him the question again. He says, a pencil. So it turns out he begs outside the school. And these kids come out of school, they're waiting for their ride, the bus or their car, chauffeur-driven car, and they sit on the wall next to where he's begging, and they open their notebooks, and they've got a pencil, and they're drawing, and they're writing, and they're happy, they're hugging. He thinks his ticket to happiness is a pencil. So Adam Braun buys a whole bunch of pencils. In every country he goes to thereafter, he doles out pencils to kids on the street. He comes back to New York, he's haunted by the image of this 8-year-old beggar boy. All he wanted was a pencil. So he says to himself, I'm going to start a foundation, promise of a pencil, and I'm going to build a school in Africa. It's going to be $40,000. So he does a fundraiser in New York. His friends on social media support him. He wants to raise 3,000. He raises 6,000. Then he travels around the country. He goes to dorms. Sometimes one student will meet him, sometimes 4. A young lady in a small college in California says, Adam, I'm going to ride a bike from the West Coast to the East Coast, and I'll raise $10,000 in pledges. She gets 10,000, somebody matches it, 20,000, costs him 40,000 to build a school. He's on the rooftop in Manhattan, feeling like a fish out of water because he's the only guy under 30. All the other are men, mostly white men, mostly over 60. And a gentleman walks over to him and says, young man, what do you do? He says, I work for a nonprofit. And the guy thumbs his nose and walks away. And as he's walking away, he says, sir, let me have your card. The guy gives him his card. And he writes to him, and 3 days later, he says, can you spare 20 minutes and have a cup of coffee with me? And the guy says, sure. When they meet, he sits down. Now think about it. The word non-profit has a negative connotation. What does the CEO make? 1.3 million? Going with Gulf golf junkets, right? What is the overhead? 70%? What? I give him $1,000, 700 goes to overhead. So he says to the guy, I don't work for a nonprofit. I work for a for-purpose organization. Better way to say, I build schools for poor kids. And the guy takes out his checkbook and writes him a check for 20 grand on the spot, half a school. His grandmother, ironically, her name is Adam Braun. He's a Holocaust survivor. And Adam and grandma are very, very close. And she says to him one day, Adam, you were working for Mitt Romney, Bain, in Boston. What happened? What is this pencil thing you're doing? He says, Ma, come and sit down. He takes his computer and he's, I'm going to show you 3 slides. The first slide is these poor kids playing in the dirt. The second slide is the first school he built in Africa, in an African country. And the third slide, as you walk up the steps and enter the foyer, there's a plaque, and it says, this school is dedicated to Mom, Adam Braun. And then the 2 of them saw. He has now built, next slide. I need to update this slide. Next slide. I looked it up yesterday, 512 schools. 512 schools all over the world. Forbes magazine has rated him as one of the most influential people in the world under the age of 30 years. And he found his purpose in life with that one interaction with that 8-year-old beggar boy in India. Next slide. The Buddha once said, every life has a measure of sorrow. Sometimes it is this that awakens us. Next slide. Now here on the screen, you see a gentleman whose name is Papa Jaime. I met him 20 years ago at the leadership course at Kellogg, and we've become good friends. He's originally from the country Colombia. His name is Jaime Aragon. At age 20, he's now 70, close to 70. He's standing at a street corner in Bogota. And across the street, there's a sewer. And these orphans live there in the sewer with human excrement. He's feeling sorry for their plight. A 7-year-old girl emerges. She's smiling at him, beautiful girl. And he's again saying to himself, I got to do something for these kids. As they're having this interchange, a car comes around the corner, stops in the middle of the street, a window rolls down. Somebody tosses a toy. It's a yellow school bus, Fisher-Price toy, and the car recedes. This girl has never possessed a toy. She comes running up to the middle of the street, picks up the toy, she's looking at Jaime out of the middle, beaming with joy. And tragically, as they're having this interaction, a speeding truck comes around the corner and kills her. So he says to it, this is it. This is my calling in life. He has adopted, housed, schooled, and fed 100,000 orphans. So he's a national hero, Papa. I said, Papa, how do you pay for it? How many staff do you have? He said, I have a staff of 150. Sanjeev, I have a bakery. The only thing we make is cookies. And I've convinced all the restaurants in Medellin, Bogota to have a cookie jar next to the cash register. As people are leaving, they grab a cookie. There's a shoebox with a slit, they drop change. I get 50% of my needs met. I said, wow, what about the other 50%? He said, I'm a motivational speaker. I speak all over Latin America and I plumb my own radium into my foundation. I said, Papa, come on, that doesn't cut it. I know what motivational speakers get. He says, you're right, Sanjeev, every time I need money, out of the blue, somebody answers it. He says, 3 weeks ago, I needed 41,000 US dollars. So I go to 3 banks to pay my electricity bills, other bills, and they all turn me down. Papa, we already got loans with us. We can't give you more loans. Don't even tell anyone what rate. So he's coming back to his office and there's a street woman across the street. She looks up, Papa Jaime, crosses the street, gives him a hug. He turns to her and says, are you hungry? Come on, come to the office. So she's sitting in his office, drinking coffee and eating cookies. He's on the phone, calling 3 other bankers, and she can tell that he's being turned on. So she looks at him and says, Papa, how much money do you need? He says, Sanjeev, I told her I need 41,000 US dollars. She looks at him, smiles and says, Papa, I give it to you. He said, I said to myself, she's cuckoo. The street woman. She opened her purse, she had $16,000. The son had given her the money and said, go to the bank, deposit it, sign this paper and move into this house. She says, the weather's good. I saved some other money. I can move later. You need it. Your children need it. Take it now. No questions asked. You can return it if you want, when you want. He said, that kind of thing happens to me all the time. He's an amazing guy, absolutely amazing guy. He knew Mother Teresa very well. He went to the leper colony in Calcutta. And he did acupuncture on her and the nuns. He got nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Mother Teresa got it, he got some other Peace Prize. Just a saint of a guy, amazing man. Found his purpose in life. 50 years ago, witnessing the tragic death of that 7-year-old beautiful girl. Next slide. So I'm going to finish with this parable. You and I don't have to be like Adam Braun or Papa Jaime or Mariah Smith. There's so many other examples I can give you. We can all make a difference. And this is the starfish parable, where there are 10,000 starfish stranded on a beach. And this young girl goes, picks one up, twirls it and throws it into the water. It darts off. Picks another one, darts off. There's an old man sitting in a rocking chair, smoking a pipe, reading a book. He says, young lady, come here. What are you doing? 10,000 starfish stranded here. Look across, there's another beach, 15,000. Do you think you're making a difference? So she picks a starfish, twirls it, throws it into the water, and swims away. She turns to the old man and says, it made a difference to that one. Right? We can all make a difference. Next slide. So I'm going to end by sharing with you my purpose in life. My purpose in life is to fulfill my dharma, which is a Sanskrit word that incorporates vocation, moral compass, authenticity, truth, to teach medicine, leadership, happiness, to do it grounded in humility within our desire to learn every single day, to celebrate with gratitude my family, friends, colleagues, students, and patients who inspire me in countless ways, and in some small measure, inspire everyone I meet on this amazing life journey. Next slide, I think my last slide. I invite you to reflect on what gives you great joy and resonates for you. Take a few minutes now, Later, write it down, share it with your family, your best friends. Next slide. It is my fervent hope, next slide. Next slide. That you will, or you have already found your purpose in life. You found lasting happiness. That it will give you unbridled joy and light up every single day of your life. Thank you so much.
Sanjeev, Dr. Chopra, thank you so much. Will you take about 5 or 7 minutes for Q&A?
Yeah.
Okay. You'll have to speak up because we can't bring this up. We don't have the equipment in this room. So anyone who has questions, just raise your hand. I'll recognize you and speak up because there'll be a few probably.
You got two books that you will get.
I'm sorry, say it again.
If you had two books, one good and then.
Two books to recommend. And the ones I've written are disqualified. I think Man's Search for Meaning. If people haven't read it, they should read it. If you've read it, reread it. And then my brother, who's written 95 books, 25 are New York Times bestseller. I wrote a bestseller with him, but that's not the one I'm recommending. He wrote a book called The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. And it's really elegant. I read that every year and I get something more each time. So those are 2 books. Gina?
I have one first.
Yeah.
It's just so powerful. Edith Eger, if you don't know her, she's a psychologist, and she's considered the female Viktor Frankl, and she was an Auschwitz person. She's now 96 years old. Really good to hear her podcast. She's great. And she wrote 2 books. But the book, The Gift, 14 Lessons to Save Your Life, is extraordinary. It's a little book. And after I wrote it, I thought no more books need to be written in the self-help genre.
You know, I also thought I had a quote on forgiveness that didn't come through on the slides. And it's a wonderful quote by Louis Desmedis, who was a German theologian, scholar, and philosopher. And he said, to forgive is to set a prisoner free. To forgive is to set a prisoner free and discover the prisoner was you. Right? How good is that? We only imprisoning ourselves. Other questions, comments? Yes.
What could you describe perhaps some stumbling blocks in people who aren't buying in or having trouble embracing some of these concepts? Repeat the question.
Yeah, so say the question again.
Curious about stumbling blocks for individuals to buy in or feel comfortable.
Yeah, I think the stumbling blocks for people to buy in or embrace something that's said that may resonate for a lot of people, but not for them, is usually a commentary about them and their life experiences. Maybe they've been betrayed in the past, or they read something or heard something and they thought, oh my God, this is going to be wonderful for me. And they did it and it didn't pan out. So they tend to be skeptical, they tend to be pessimistic. You know, Winston Churchill once said, a pessimist sees difficulty in every opportunity. An optimist sees opportunity in every difficulty. So it depends on your frame of mind. There's a wonderful book called Mindset, Karen DeVock. Most of us have a combination of growth mindset and fixed mindset. The more growth mindset you have, the better off and the more you succeed in life. So we have to embrace those concepts.
There's a question from Jim and Mary Dana on the Zoom. How is the happiness set point measured?
The happiness set point is measured using a scale, which is very complicated and has a lot of things. Gina?
No, and it was done in the study, and I think the most important point is you will know your general set point, and you will know when it's elevated by giving and gifts of purpose. One of the easiest things to your question that you can do is like relive happy memories. That will instantly, smiling and reliving happy memories is one of the two things you can do that instantly feel happy.
Yeah, memories. So let me ask you a question. How many of you have had a recent vacation? Even 2 days, 3 days a week, so few. How many of you have a vacation coming up? What's wrong with the rest of you? Now, the ones who have a vacation coming up, can you raise your hands? Okay, look at them, they're all smiling. Just the thought of a vacation, right? And when you're there, don't take 1800 selfies. Enjoy the birds chirping, the aroma of coffee, a walk in the woods, a visit to a museum. And when you come back, your best friends and family will say, how's that vacation? As you're reminiscing, you'll be happy. Amazing, thoughts can make us happy. If you smile, you'll feel happy.
I have another book to suggest to your question. It's Dr. David Burns, he wrote a book called Feeling Well, and then he wrote a Feeling Well handbook. And it takes you through exercises that help you understand how you think, and whether you're a negative thinker or whether you have catastrophe thinking. And once you go through the exercises, you can figure it out. The rest of the book takes you through practices you can do to change your thought process, for knowing that your happiness or your unhappiness is related to the thoughts that you have. How do you manage those thoughts? It's really powerful. Feeling Well, Dr. David Burns.
Sanjeev, when you mentioned forgiveness, I was thinking continuously about forgiving others as I've gone through my own life. And I thought, what about, and I really need this, what about forgiving yourself?
Oh, yeah. It starts with forgiving yourself. You can't forgive others unless you forgive yourself. And none of us are perfect. Even the greatest people were not necessarily great saints. They all have their faults. And how do you forgive a Hitler or a Stalin or a Mussolini or what's happening right now? It's very, very difficult. It's very difficult. But there's a wonderful quote by Mahatma Gandhi again. He said, whenever I despair, I remind myself that truth and love always wins. There may have been tyrants and murderers throughout history. And at some point, they may have seemed invincible. But at the end, they always fail. Always fail. You remember, always. So I think we have to, as we're coping with the tragedy in the Middle East, Ukraine, elsewhere, we have to sort of remember that. The other thing is that the future belongs to the young people. They're the ones who are innocent, they are very creative, they're going to be amazing leaders, and they bring hope. Again, Rabindranath Tagore, Nobel laureate from India, he had a wonderful saying. He said, every child comes with a message. Every child comes with a message. God is not yet discouraged. Every child brings hope. So I think we have to work with children and young people. I'm friends with a guy, Ilan Devon, and he graduated from Harvard Divinity School, and his parents had come, and then we had dinner at our home. Brilliant young man. His father was the ambassador from Israel to Canada. And he had a younger sister, 13 years of age. She goes to this very private school where all the ambassadors' children are there. And she gets into a fight with the 13-year-old daughter of the Jordanian ambassador. And then the two of them say to each other, what hope is there for our people if you and I fight? And we're educated. We are in Toronto. So they started a camp. And every year they got sponsors, and they got like 30 kids, 15-year-olds, 15 from Israel and 50 from Palestinians. And the first 3 days, they would glare at each other and scowl and hostility. By the end of 4 weeks, they were hugging, they were best friends for life. Again, I think the future is young people. We need to somehow do more of this. Churches, churches. 13-year-old girls pick up at the end.
Will you take just 2 more?
Sure, as many.
Just 2 more to go. Not more.
Share a story. Yes,
I have a story, you mentioned El Sistema in Venezuela.
yeah,
A friend of mine is a Suzuki teacher who travels internationally down there to teach. And she reports to me that Venezuela, the government being in such a mess for like, 10, 20 years now. El Sistema has been co-opted to glorify the regime, and the actual teachers who were helping the poor
Yeah.
children are unemployed, wandering other
Oh,
countries.
gee.
Yeah, so as
That'd be-
kind of in a competition with them to see who wins that
Yeah.
one, but. And so these things need support, and if it isn't possible, then, yeah.
yeah,
Unfortunately.
thank you for sharing. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so this goes a little bit to yours, this also goes over to yours. So what I use is I use reframing as this bridge to try to take, if people don't believe, that you're trying to help them understand that they need to think positive. I've gone through some experiences from family members that have had very tough times. And this idea of reframing, I've done it for my kids, I've done it at work, but I've also done it with people who are having really, serious challenges. And I think it's a real key point to be able to do that. I mean, I resonate with everything that you've said today, but this idea of taking someone and moving them away, because they just can't get past this. This was your point. You just can't get past this. And if you all of a sudden take them to the point where you're saying, let's reframe the situation. The story of you said that the 2 young girls at 13, what they needed to do was reframe that situation,
Very
to
good.
look at it from a different perspective, because they could not get through looking at it the perspective they were.
Very good, thank you. Where can one read about this? Are there books or, have you given a TED talk? All right, you know what Voltaire said? Voltaire said, every man is guilty of all the good he did not do. He also said, cherish those who speak the truth, but beware of those who find it. We also lived to 83 years when life expectancy was 40. But it's not proof we lived that long. But do you know how many cups of coffee he drank? Take a guess. You'll never guess, never. 50 to 72 cups of coffee a day. People ask me what size, I said, how does it matter? This size, 50 answers. Jefferson drank a lot of coffee. Teddy Roosevelt drank a lot of coffee. Teddy Roosevelt's grandson said, my grandfather's coffee mug is so big, it's more akin to a bathtub. So coffee lowers the risk of 7 common cancers: Parkinson's, cognitive decline, early Alzheimer's, cirrhosis, diabetes, gout, dental cavities, death by suicide, good for bone health. So the holy grail would be, if it has all these health benefits, do men and women who drink coffee have lower mortality? Then our 5 studies, New England Journal, Annals, Lancet, men and women who drink coffee have lower total and all-cause mortality. So one of the books I've written is called Coffee, the Magical Elixir. Packs up in a discount and perk you up. But you don't have to read it. I just told you the whole book. No, thank you for the audience.
Dr. Sanjeev Chopra, thank you so much. And thank you, Alan. Pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah.